In this class, we talked about property management and laws that affect landlord-tenant relationships. To start, we looked at what a property manager is and what they do. A property manager is a real estate agent who helps someone operate leased or rented properties. The property manager does things like collecting rent, responding to tenant requests, or evicting tenants. If a real estate agent represents someone during a real estate transaction, a property manager represents someone when dealing with the properties that are leased or rented. The relationship between the owner of a property and a property manager is also an agency relationship. Just like the relationship between a real estate agent and a seller or buyer, a property manager has a set of duties and responsibilities they owe the owner. The general duties should look familiar since the general duties owed by agents, regardless of who they represent. The property manager will obey the reasonable and lawful instruction of the property owner, be loyal to the property owner, act with care and skill when carrying out tasks for the property owner, and account for actions taken out in the name of the property owner. Obedience to the property owner is a simple matter of doing what the owner asks you to do. However, that doesn't extend to actions that are illegal. The owner can't force a property manager to break the law. On the most basic level, loyalty to the owner requires a property manager to put the needs and desires of the owner ahead of their own. The level of loyalty required from a property manager is high, so high that the manager is considered to be a fiduciary of the owner. Part of being loyal means being honest with the property owner. It's critical that a property manager share relevant information they have with the owner. This applies to both what they do when acting as a manager and relationships they have with other people. Should a conflict of interest arise for a property manager, they need to immediately tell the owner. On the other hand, a property manager needs to protect the owner by keeping confidential information confidential. This doesn't mean lying to people. Rather, a manager shouldn't divulge information about the owner when it isn't necessary. Acting with care and skill is about professionalism. Property managers are expected to be trained experts in their field. The services and advice that a manager provides to an owner should have a high level of quality. Accounting involves keeping good records of what was done for the owner. This is especially important when it comes to money. Property managers usually handle rent money collected from tenants. The manager needs to document the journey of this money from the tenant to the owner. The manager also needs to keep good track of any other money that's collected for the owner or spent on their behalf. The property manager will often be tasked with maintaining the owner's property. While the manager may have authority to spend money to cover repairs or refurbishment, it's ultimately not their money. It's the property owner's. A manager who doesn't keep good track of money they collected or spent can end up putting the owner in a difficult financial position. They can also be accused of a number of things from negligence to criminal fraud or embezzlement. In the second segment, we discussed leased properties and lease agreements. To clear up any confusion, leases and rentals are not the same. Despite their similarities, leases normally have longer terms, usually a year or more, when compared to rentals, which are usually month to month. Also, leases don't commonly renew automatically. When a rental will normally be automatically renewed if the rent is paid on time, a standard lease is a one-time agreement. To continue to lease a space after the end of the term, the tenant will have to make a new lease agreement with the owner. We discussed 4 basic categories of leases: gross, net, percentage, and ground. The first 2, gross and net, involve the amount of property's operational costs that are being paid by the landlord and the tenant. With a gross lease, the landlord covers all costs associated with operating the property, those being property taxes, insurance premiums, utilities, and maintenance costs. Gross leases are much more commonly used for residential properties. Additionally, they often have higher rental rates and shorter terms. Net leases are the opposite. In this case, the tenant pays for some or all of the costs of operating the property. As a result, net leases often have lower lease rates and longer terms. Percentage leases base the lease rate on a percentage of the profits generated by the business leasing the property. For this reason, this kind of lease is exclusive to commercial properties. A ground lease is a complex form of lease through which the tenant is given the right to build improvements on the property. When the lease expires, the property, along with any structures, regardless of who built them, is returned to the property owner. After that, we address the subject of tenant relations and tenant rights. As an agent of the owner, a property manager will be the one who most often interacts with tenants. For this reason, a manager needs to provide good customer service to tenants while obeying the directions of the owner. Tenants have a number of rights that need to be respected, such as having a space that's safe, not being unfairly discriminated against, not being charged unnecessary or excessive fees, and being able to enjoy the use of the property. When selecting tenants, a manager needs to be fair but firm. The application process should be fairly transparent. Any costs, the screening criteria, and the applicant's rights need to be communicated. Then we transitioned into a discussion of fair housing as it related to rentals and leases. Discrimination is an issue in the rental and lease markets, just as it is in the property sales market. The property manager has an important duty to ensure that fair housing laws are being complied with. The property manager needs to avoid discriminating against tenants and prospective tenants on the basis of protected class status. This applies to the tenant selection process and any advertising they release. The property manager also needs to act to counter discriminatory tendencies on the part of the owner. If the owner orders the manager to do something that violates fair housing laws, the manager must refuse. Violating the fair housing law can result in significant financial penalties. Fair housing claims are handled by HUD. When a fair housing complaint is received, HUD will begin a formal investigation. Depending on the findings, the complaint might be dismissed or it might go to a formal hearing. Remember, retaliation against someone for filing a fair housing complaint is, itself, a violation of federal fair housing laws. The last segment of this class was an exploration of two of Michigan's major landlord-tenant laws. First, we went over provisions of the Landlord-Tenant Relationship Act. Then we covered provisions of the Truth in Renting Act. The property manager has an important role in the rental and leasing market as both agent of the owner and intermediary between the tenants and landlord. We're going to move away from property management issues now. Next, we'll focus on environmental concerns and how they affect real estate. Thank you for choosing At Your Pace Online.